Welcome to the Dog and Gus Show. Now on Feel It Radio.
I almost cut you off again there.
Again, yeah.
I'll get it eventually.
Yeah, you'll someday.
So what we got going on today?
Same old thing. We got an awesome guest in today to talk to. Who do we have?
Raphael Weinroth-Browne, a composer and cellist, part of the duo The Visit, one half of the group Camoncello, and cellist, keys, and vocals with Norwegian band Leprous. You've been doing 100 live shows, is that right?
Well, I've done many shows with Leprous. I should just say, as a quick correction, that I haven't done any backing vocals with Leprous, although it's some people believe that, but it's not true. But I do the cello and keys. I think close to 200 shows with those guys now since 2017.
Yeah, my bad. Sorry about that.
That's all good. No, but otherwise you did your research perfectly.
Well, that's all we have for today.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks very much.
Just kidding.
Thank you. Yeah.
No, thanks, Raph, for being here. We saw that you were on, did a show with our friends of the show, Nick and Christine. So we were surprised to see you, but obviously the community here in Ottawa is pretty small, I guess. Tight.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, in terms of music and people who are active in the scene. Yeah,
that's
100%.
Cool.
Also saw a video of you at the Record Center playing as well.
Yeah. I got to play there recently. It's been a while. I used to play there a lot.
Was that right?
Yeah. I did a lot of shows there, and
cool.
Always a great place. But in this last one, I think was my favorite actually that I've done. So
good.
Yeah,
good. Yeah, because I've seen a few times because I go there every once in a while. But I see they usually have DJs too, right? Like people just spin in music there as well. So it's pretty cool.
It is very cool. It's kind of like highlighting the great musicians here in the Ottawa area, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's nice to have places that are kind of informal that people can just show up to and discover new stuff. I think there's maybe a preconception that among certain people, certainly that like all the good stuff is at the festivals and at the big venues. You have to go to like Blues Fest or you have to go to the NAC or something like that, but it's really not true. A lot of the best stuff and a lot of the real magic happens in the small venues, and it's important to nurture that actually, because that way it allows those things to go somewhere and not just stay at the same level.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Agreed. And the Ottawa Festival, like the ones downtown in the market, the one you're doing at the Record Center, like all over the city. Here on Bank Street, they close down the streets to play. It's awesome. Yeah,
I think it's really important to get new people interested because I would say one of the challenges with Ottawa is that there's actually a relatively high population. People talk about it as a small city, but it's relative to the adjacent cities.
Right.
But when you compare it to many European cities, like 1 million people is quite a bit actually. Mm-hmm. But we don't have access to 1 million people. In the arts scene, it's like there's a lot of people who I think would attend events if they knew more about it, but they're not necessarily plugged into culture.
Right.
They're not just ready for culture. So having these kind of like the free shows and things that are in more like off venue or informal venue scenarios really helps, I think, to get more people interested in attending music outside of, like the subscriptions and the festival passes and whatnot.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. It does.
It really does, yeah. And maybe just even a little podcast for the Ottawa music scene.
Maybe just a little one.
I'm just kidding. Well, I'm not actually, but I sort of am.
Yeah. It's a huge help.
No, I appreciate that, Raph. Sorry, do you mind if I call you Raph?
Absolutely, yeah, go for sure.
So you're classically trained as a cellist, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And you went to Canterbury. We talked about that. So Canterbury is a school here in Ottawa that basically does nurture musicians, and you have to apply for it, and artists of all types. So talk about your younger days as a musician. Was the cello the first item you picked up?
Well, I was always interested in music, and it was the first instrument that I kind of studied seriously, I guess, because I was interested in instruments that I had kind of around me, I guess. Like, sometimes there were pianos and guitars around, and I tried them out and stuff, and I liked music. And I was listening to a lot of music growing up. My parents had like a big record collection, and we listened to the radio all the time, and I listened to the radio all the time, actually, as a little kid. Like, I had a small radio in my room. So, like, even when I was, like, 7, for example, I remember I would wake up really early in the morning before school, and, like, I'd listen to rock music, and, like, I was getting to know all the music from the 90s, that way. So it was, like, I was always big into music, for sure. But at a certain point, my folks asked me, do you want to take music lessons? And I said, I want to take cello lessons because it was something different. It wasn't like piano or guitar or something that everybody plays. And I think that's always been my nature, is to do something that stands out or that is different from the norm. It's just how I am. And So that's how I kind of got into studying music more seriously, like taking lessons. But as soon as I started doing cello lessons, then I got into actually playing piano more seriously, like taking piano lessons, and I kind of picked up guitar and like taught myself. And so I started to think more in terms of, okay, what can I create on these instruments? And that was always kind of part of my sensibility, being a creator, being a composer, and imagining the possibilities of the instruments and maybe what could be done that would be kind of more unique to my style. So I guess that's kind of maybe how it began. But as you grow older and you move into an environment where you're more surrounded by people who are also into the same thing as you and people who are more advanced, then that encourages you to go deeper with what you're doing and to intensify your activities in that way. So for me, it was like that kind of every few years I was in an environment surrounded by more musicians and better teachers and people who knew more than I did, and that always encouraged me to really go for it and kind of deep dive into whatever I was doing. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's a really good answer to that question for sure.
You think? And the funny, sorry to jump in, but the funny thing is you are so unique. When you look at a classical cellist in an orchestra, you're certainly not you probably could play that way. However, your style is all your own, right? And you're unique, as you mentioned. So I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, it's something that's happened both organically, but also by design in a way where I, went to university and studied classical music and, did these performance degrees and stuff. But I knew deep down that I was never going to play in an orchestra full time, or that I was going to kind of follow that path fully. There was something about it that just didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel like that was where I needed to be and that was the end game. There was always something else that I was after. And I felt that studying music was just a tool that enabled me to have the skills to express what I wanted without any limitation. So to create pieces that might be very technically challenging or very unusual, and to be able to still succeed at playing them by having that background, to not be limited by the ability on the instrument or the knowledge of the music or what have you. So I feel like I really used school as a means to develop that and to develop my sound. But at the same time, when I was going to school, I was also gigging in the evenings and playing in bands and kind of getting out there and doing session work and stuff. So I feel like I had a dual education where I was doing classical music and I was doing everything else, and often playing in styles that weren't necessarily my wheelhouse initially. And I had to kind of get to know them and figure out how I could incorporate my playing into that. And every time you play in a setting that's not normal to you or it's not habitual, you basically expand. You kind of stretch that muscle. You shock the muscle, I guess, and then it grows. So it's that sort of thing really helped me to develop a voice that I wouldn't have expected to have, and to find new techniques and new approaches that I then kind of stole from my own music.
Nice.
So it's been that type of evolution, I guess, where it's you realize you have all these things at your disposal, all these other things you can say. And then when you have your own idea, there's a lot more nuances, and more vocabulary with which to express it.
Cool. Another great answer. I'm just going to stop. You just keep talking.
Yeah, I can give you a bad answer if you want.
No, please.
No,
please.
we're good with that.
All right.
So in the classical genre, I just are they accepting of you going out away from say a classical piece from say Bach or Mozart and then just making it your own? You know what? I want to do this. I don't want to do this structured piece. I want to make it different.
If you're playing in a classical environment and you're playing music from the standard repertoire, from the canon, there's an expectation that you sort of exist within certain boundaries. So it's kind of like fashion or something in a way. It's you can work within a certain framework, but then once you go outside of it, it's too outlandish. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I understand that, because obviously in any style that you play, you have to respect certain norms or idioms. If you're playing jazz, it would be the same thing, for example. If you're playing music from another, a non-Western culture, let's say, then if you're playing Indian classical music, then if you're in a certain rag, you have a set of notes that you can play, you don't play like notes that are outside of that, or notes that behave in a different way, for example. So I understand that on one hand, but at the same time, I think that there's like we always talk about there being an uptightness in classical music, and that definitely exists. And there's a lot of dogma around how one should play, existing works, especially when there's so much knowledge about it, and there's so many recordings and so many opinions, and there's a big educational institution where different teachers have different ideas, and they inherited that from their teachers, and and then they're prescribing it to their students. So there's a lot of dogma around how one should play. Right. Should one use vibrato and Bach? How much? Like, where do you do trills and ornaments? Like, what is tasteless, for example? Like, what? And I have opinions about that too. But I think that it's more that there's if you decide to do something that's really idiosyncratic, don't expect to be well received for it. Like, you're going to come up against a lot of resistance, because the wiggle room is very minute. It's like there's really not a lot. It's kind of like you can move in certain directions very incrementally, but don't try to be too radical, because like you're going to feel the resistance. And for me, what I've wanted to do is just so different. Like, the whole language of it is so far removed from classical music, because it's really influenced by other things. And it just happens to be that, the instrument that I make a living playing is associated with that style and that tradition. So really, it's like I'm using it as a vehicle to say something else. Mm-hmm. I think it's a very capable vehicle, and one like the cello, for example, has a lot of versatility and can do many things that people don't expect. And that's something I learned actually early on, attending like master classes and seeing concerts. I realized, whoa, there's some stuff you can do that's really gnarly with this thing. And like, I want to do that stuff, and I want to show people what it can do. And so I really like to incorporate that into my pieces. And when I'm playing with other artists too, to kind of sneak a bit of that in there, so that it's more maybe cinematic. It's not just like you're playing notes, but you're creating a soundscape or sound world that, conjures up images in the mind. And I like that idea a lot. So yeah, I guess that's more how I would approach the instrument and how I would, direct my focus. I want to be creatively free. I also want to create a structure where I feel that what I'm doing is coherent and it makes sense, and my ideas are clear. And that's where like studying and understanding music comes in, where like you, on one hand, it's like you have your creative voice, but also you know how to filter it, and you know how to refine your ideas and make it so that what you're hearing in your head makes sense to someone else. It's like they feel it emotionally, and it also has like an argument that holds, Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. That was profound. I love that. Thank you so much. Like when you play, as like when you're thinking about the actual instrument, are you very much a historian of the actual instrument, or do you kind of just like, obviously you respect that, but you obviously have your own way also, but do you kind of incorporate the two?
That's a good question. I think we're always influenced by what came before.
Agreed. Yeah.
And that's how we're able to make new things. We're always standing on other people's shoulders in a way, but also we're all unique. So it doesn't matter even if we try to imitate, we'll probably fail and end up doing something unique in a certain capacity. I would say that definitely like music from the past has an influence on my work, but I like to kind of put a new spin on it. It's sort of like, when you have films, for example, that are like set in some kind of alternate timeline or future or something like that. Or maybe you have a scenario where like there's some sort of world building, if it's a book or a movie or, whatever, that the time in which it takes place isn't really clear. I feel that a lot, for example, with like Miyazaki, those like Studio Ghibli films where there's this feeling of like it could be in the past or in the future. You can't really tell. You don't really know where everything came from. There's like technology, but it's very old fashioned, and there's like magic, and all these things are coexisting. And I kind of like that idea with music, at least the music that I make, that it's not tied to a certain era in any way. I mean, there might be bits and pieces of different ones, kind of like this sort of dream building thing where like you're in this universe and all these different bits of your subconscious are all kind of like together in the same place randomly almost, but they all fit into this thing that feels timeless. And it could be like, is it ancient? Is it the future? We don't really know. So for example, like I have this piece called Ricercare. Ricercare is like, or the Ricercar is a form that comes from like the Baroque and like pre-Baroque eras. And so it's like an old form. So I named this piece that way because I felt that it was referencing older things and like this kind of Baroque style of sort of invention on like a string instrument, playing a solo work, you know, and trying to sort of innovate and create these ideas with the one instrument. But at the same time, it has like this really strong metal influence, and it's got like a Middle Eastern vibe to it throughout. And so for me, it's kind of like, it's like the steampunk version of the Ricercare or whatever. It's like it's got something like it's got a motor on it or something. It's it's somehow like cybernetically enhanced or whatever. It's nice. Like you know what I mean. For me, I dig that stuff. So like it's like you're referencing this older thing, you're commenting on the past, but you're also looking towards the future. But it's something that maybe it could have been written back then, you know what I mean? It could have been played on like viola da gamba, or something like that. I just like that idea that like maybe you could be from any era and you're making this thing. And, it has elements. For example, I'm referencing like this piece by a Belgian violinist composer, Isaïe, who is in turn referencing a piece by Bach, and like quoting. I'm not really quoting as much, but it's a bit more indirect, but I was inspired by it. So like, I guess that's one way where I would say I'm influenced by the past. I'm also influenced by my own past. Like I hear a lot of like Lamb of God influence in that piece, where it's like I listened to them a lot as a teenager and I still really like them and stuff. So like, it's all of those things coming together, the things that I enjoy in something that I play. And that's kind of like, that's the happy place, I guess, when you're playing something where it has all of your favorite stuff in it, and you just get to choose that combination and just enjoy it. I think it's great.
Yeah, and they're wondering why you got this big grin on your face while you're playing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're like, I'm loving this, and they're kind of going, this is really interesting, and you're like, you got the mecca of stank look, the stank look, where you're just you're so into the music that nothing else matters.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like you're just in that zone, and this is the best place to be at this moment.
Yeah, it's a probably. I mean, imagine it would just be an amazing thing for him to play exactly what he wants to play.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Now, not that you wouldn't anyway, but certainly if you're being directed by a leader of some sort, that you may not be able to play the way you want to all the time, right? But
there's varying degrees of freedom, as a musician, and particularly as an instrumentalist. Like, I think if you're a singer, it's different. Where like I think singers have kind of more leeway just naturally because of the role that they're in and how they're just typically treated. I think in terms of what they get to do. But like if you're an instrumentalist, it means that you're often working for hire and you have to kind of fit someone else's vision. And that's also a good exercise because it forces you to focus your creative energy or your skills. It's kind of like this fire hose. You have to point it in one direction and like not just kind of be all over the place,
right?
Because you have to serve that thing. And if you can do it really well, then you actually really elevate that project. But at the same time, like, when you just get to play the thing that you really dig, it's a great feeling, and it's a feeling of freedom that I really appreciate in music. And it's great when you're doing the thing that you just really like, and I think people feel that too. They feel it when you have that level of engagement, and it translates to them too. It's kind of contagious, and that's good. That's like how we are able to, I guess, disseminate new stuff and get other people into it.
Yep. You guys can't see him. Well, you might see him on the video and stuff, but just when Raph is talking, he's just got this grin on his face. He just loves like talking about his music and stuff, and we're just like,
oh yeah,
this is in my head. I'm going, I need better questions because your answers are just amazing, and I'm like,
it's not necessary to because we could just have a chat, and the Raph is definitely into his music, and we appreciate that a lot. So thank you
as music lovers. And now a word from our sponsor.
We are currently recording Dog and Gus in the podcast booth at Staples Studio, Ottawa, on 403 Bank Street. where they have everything to help your business work, learn, and grow. They are currently offering a clean and safe place to work with desks, offices, and drop-in memberships. More than a co-working space, Studio is a community to help you work, learn, and grow. For more information on pricing, please visit studio.staples.ca or contact the community manager at studio.ottawa@staples.ca. Hey, Doug, want some hot sauce for your tacos?
You brought your own hot sauce?
Damn right. Have you tried Gringo's Sizzling Nirvana? It'll change your life.
Nice. Are there other types of sauces?
Absolutely. There's different hot sauces for different palates, incredible barbecue sauces, red pepper jam, and salsa. All of them use fresh ingredients, and it can be delivered to your door.
Hey, how do we get some?
Go to www.gringosblazingsauces.com and order some.
Gringo's Blazing Sauces.
Bring the fire to your food.
So I don't know about you, but when I get up and I get ready to go to work or I'm going out, whatever, my mindset kind of just dictates what I'm going to listen to that day. Are you the same? Like you just kind of like you got up, I feel like listening to, I don't know, like you said, Lamb of God. Yeah. Feels like that kind of day.
Yeah, I mean, it's always mood-based and certain times of day and energy level, I think. The funny thing about me is, I'm kind of more of a morning person, so I prefer listening to metal in the morning.
Nice.
And like later in the day, not so much. I prefer more mellow things. So it's kind of like I feel like my energy level like maybe wanes throughout the day, and then as it gets later, then I kind of want like mellower stuff.
Katy Perry.
I don't know if I would call it mellow, but
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
I have a few like pop guilty pleasures.
We're gonna ask about that.
Yeah, we'll get on that. We'll get on that. We just saw Rammstein. I don't know. Yeah. I've never seen. Like I was talking to Dog about this. We went together and in Montreal, and it was unbelievable how big of a spectacle that thing was.
Yeah.
Like, have you seen some of the videos from their shows and stuff?
Everybody was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't go, but like in general, I've been hearing this year so much good stuff about their production and just
it was insane.
They have the biggest production pretty much like in rock almost right now.
I would say.
Yeah.
Like I felt like we were looking at. I was about to go meet the Dragon Princess in Game of Thrones because it was the biggest stage I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And the only reason I ask that is like, so do you like Rammstein? Do you like listen to their music sometimes?
I mean, I grew up like listening to their stuff. I was into it as a teenager. I haven't really listened to them much lately. I feel like, growing up, I was sort of listening to all the bands, and now I'm like working so much. I'm working on other people's records and doing my own stuff and everything. So
that's great.
Like my ears are kind of full in a way, and I have a hard time like sometimes like checking out new things or keeping up with bands that I used to keep up with.
It's tough, man. There's so much out there.
Yeah. Plus he's busy.
Yeah. He's
and maybe as a musician, at the end of the day, you've played all day and you've put a lot of energy out into your music, and maybe you just don't want to listen to music sometimes.
Totally. Yeah. Like I often have ear fatigue. Sometimes I just don't want to hear music, or like I just want to engage with another art form where it doesn't feel like I'm at the office and like I'm sort of maybe focusing with such a critical mind on it, where I can kind of just feel the magic of it again. Because sometimes, when you're deep inside things, and like especially when you're making records and you're very analytical, then you just listen to everything that way, and it's nice to be able to zoom out and just kind of have that feeling of wonder about some piece of art. Like you don't know how it's possible to make that thing. When you like witness a performance, you see like a piece of art or something, on a wall, and you just go like, how do they even make this? Like, where do they start with it? And of course, when you're like really in depth in your particular art form, then the whole kind of recipe, I guess, like the approach to making it. But when you're consuming something else, then it can feel fresh again, and I like that because I feel like it inspires me in turn to do more music.
Yeah, like a reset, right?
Yeah.
So what do? You're done with the music for the day. Do you pop on the television and watch? You binge on a TV series? Do you watch a movie?
Sometimes it's nice to watch movies. I mean, I appreciate film a lot, like as an art form also, and like I think I focus a lot on the details because there's so much. Like if it's a good film, then everything should be done intentionally, and that every bit of information that you receive in the dialogue or like the set and all the objects or everything like that should have a purpose. And again, also you can pay attention to the music in a very different way.
Okay.
Because I feel like film music is so geared towards the specificity of the emotion, like that's its main function is to underline the emotion, and like anything extraneous that doesn't serve that is kind of cast aside.
Right.
It's a really good lesson for just making music in the abstract that we don't always take into account, because, you know, as musicians, we like to do things that just kind of feel good to us. Like, oh, that's fun to play, you know, but does it serve the overall work, or is it just fun to play? So I think that like film really kind of captures that, where like a good composer will know how to focus the emotion in any given scene and not have anything that's not really serving that function. So yeah, definitely I enjoy movies and stuff, but I think for me, nature is a big one. Just being like outside of the city, like, being by the river and stuff. Like Ottawa River is amazing. You know, we're lucky we have that. We can just go chill there, and it's not like, you know, completely privatized and like condos the whole way down, and you have to kind of like fight your way in there. It's like there's so many good hangout spots where you can just kind of recharge and just kind of breathe. So for me, yeah, like walking and like going out there, kind of being outside of the city, being in nature, that's a huge one. And then I feel like I get a lot of perspective on my life, you know, if I'm like way too zoomed in, for example.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense.
It's good to step back once in a while and just go.
That's why I live in the country.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, I can walk to the canal in like minutes. So that's, I hear what you're saying.
You should do it more. You should be doing that more.
Stop it.
Well, it's true. He's not wrong.
Quit being my mom.
But I also feel like I should like, go to the river and stuff more. I'm just like, oh man, why am I not spending more time here?
Yeah, because summer will end, and then but you could go out there. Winter is really nice too. So
yeah, totally.
Yep.
Do you? So are you going to be touring with Leprous, or is there something coming your way with them?
Yeah, we have a tour coming up in the States really soon. Beginning of September, we're going out with Apocalyptica, the cello metal band from Finland.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah, so we're going to be supporting them in the U.S. for just over a month. So that's going to be really cool. I mean, for me, it's like a dream come true, kind of the idea of like touring with those guys. Because again, I got into them when I was quite young, and I think that they're like one of the reasons why there's people like me playing the kind of music that I play. I guess focusing on sort of heavy music and being part of that scene with cello, like that's they were really the first to kind of do that and put it on the map. So like whenever you say that you do something that's kind of metal oriented on cello, then everyone thinks about them, of course. So that's how important they are in that regard. So it's cool that we're doing that, and it's like my second U.S. run this year. So, but we're gonna hit some new places that I haven't been before. So kind of looking forward to that.
That makes it fun too. If you're going to places you've never been before.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll get to see a little bit of them. You know, like on tour, often you don't see anything, but it's just kind of cool to not just say, oh, we're just playing the same venues, for example, that we did in the last run. You know, mixing it up a little bit. It's always, a new experience.
Right, for sure. And how did that come about? When did they approach you to come work with them, or did you sort of
Lepers?
Yeah,
they were touring throughout North America in 2016, and they had an Ottawa date, and the local promoter contacted me about like opening the show, and there was like a touring package of 4 bands, and then the promoter wanted to have like 2 local supports. A lot of bands on that that show. Too many bands. But anyway, so it was supposed to be my group to visit, but I ended up just playing it as a solo set. And then I started off the show. And I think because, of course, there were too many bands on the bill, the guys just wanted to make sure that the show was running on time. So they told the promoter, like, just tell the guy just play like 20 minutes, So then the promoter says, yeah, the Lepers guys just want you to play 20 minutes. And I said, yeah, it's fine, And then, so they went down to just check to see if things were running on time, and then saw me playing and were into it and just stayed and watched the whole thing. And the promoter came to me, I think, like partway through and said, they said you can keep playing.
That's cool.
And then I came off stage, and then they were like right there at the merch and stuff, and just, asked me like, hey, do you want to play on our next album? Like, are you interested in doing some recording? And I was like, yeah, you bet. I was already into the band. Like I was already a fan of the music for a little while, for like a couple of years. So that was kind of amazing. I was sort of like, what's even happening? And then they were
pretty sure they made a movie about you. No, I'm just kidding. Go on. Sorry to cut you off.
So it's all good. Yeah. So like, that was kind of trippy. And then they were like already talking about, we could do like a tour next year for the, new album, and like it'd be great to have you on that. And so it pretty much went from there. Like I worked on that record, and then the next year went on tour, and that was 2017, the first tour I did with them. And since then, so I've done 3 records with Leprous and a whole bunch of tours in like Europe and North America, and it's been crazy.
It's like a dream come true, man.
I mean, it's like you can't plan that stuff. You know what I mean?
No,
it's really cool how these things transpire. But the main lesson is like show up, do your best, like
follow your heart, man. You followed your heart.
Yeah, I mean, because I was doing my
cheesy
thing.
as that sounds. Sorry,
no, it's true. But you're right. It's like you do your thing, and like even if you're like in dive bar in Ottawa, like playing for your friends, pretty much, it's like you never know like who's going to be there, and it's important to just do it in spite of your popularity or what money you might be making or whatever. Like, of course, that's also challenging, to do it in spite of everything. But ultimately, that's why we do it, right? We do it because like we have to, we need to. It's not just because we want to or because it might be lucrative or someone else might be into it. Like it comes from a much deeper need. So when people say, "Oh, well, you do it because you're doing what you love," right? And I say, well, but love is a choice. You know what I mean? But like with something like this, which comes from such a deep place, like you can't not do it. Mm-hmm. So it's more of like an obsessive like need. It's like it's the type of thing that nourishes you, and if you don't do it, you really feel somehow empty.
It fills you. It fills you up.
Exactly, and it's like I would even say it's like it becomes your mission in life to do that thing and pursue it, because if you don't, then somehow maybe you're not kind of fully understanding your potential and knowing yourself, and so you have that responsibility to explore that potential and try to share also what gifts you have with other people, and to give what you have and not to just kind of hold it for yourself, but to share. I think like giving all of it away, and particularly on stage, is so important. Even if it means like you're risking maybe messing up a little bit, it's like just going for it, you know. And I felt, especially, after this whole pandemic situation, like getting back and doing shows, I felt that was so much more important. It's like, I'm going to play like I mean it, because, we just went through this whole lockdown thing and like, didn't get to perform and stuff. And now we get to do this again. It's like a second chance, and it reminds me why we do this.
Yeah. You're just being true to yourself.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. Now, for people who don't know Leprous, like I didn't know them before Gus told me about them, who would you compare them to so that they kind of have a reference as to what they're listening to?
Oh, that's a challenging one to answer, because it depends
just kind of like you just broadly, not kind of like this.
I think he wants to hear the answer he wants to hear.
Yeah, I'm fishing here.
Yeah. All right. Well, what I'm going to say first of all is that there's different eras of Leprous.
Yeah. Okay.
There's different periods depending on the album. So, for example, like the earlier work is more metal oriented in the sound and the compositions. So, like if you're into a lot of progressive metal, if you like Opeth, and if you like, some of those bands, I guess, from that tradition, then you really like the earlier albums, like maybe the first 3 albums. But then like the later albums, I would say it's more orchestrated. It's a little bit more in like the rock and pop world, but I feel like that reduces it too much. It's like, it's definitely got like I guess like a cinematic influence in the compositions. But I wouldn't say that I really know the bands that like would sound similar in a way that are well known. Like there's bands that are in our scene, like there's a group called Agent Fresco, like that we've toured with a couple of times. I would say they're like kind of a similar sounding band in a way. And there's other groups like from Scandinavia, for example, that have a bit of a similar vibe. But it's a mix of different sounds.
Okay.
It has a lot to do with the people involved in the group, right? And like everyone's kind of bringing a certain signature, and that I think informs the whole. So like I think also like we play in a lot of context with like prog and metal bands, but I think that also the music has the potential to work in a lot of other situations alongside different groups that aren't part of that scene.
Now I'm going to ask anyway. I listened to a couple, and we were talking about like the sound of this band, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's just me, but I kind of thought of Muse.
I was going to say Muse is one of those bands that, especially the more recent stuff sounds like Muse. Or Radiohead is a big influence.
Okay.
But I would say the compositions, maybe on the surface level, don't sound like Radiohead, but like if you examine maybe more of the actual way it's written, then there would be more parallels.
Right. Okay.
Well, yeah, like Radiohead. Who's the guitarist for Radiohead?
It's John Greenwood.
John, yeah, and he's like the orchestrator of that band. And he's very, very technical. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I forgot his name for a second. I love Radiohead, but it was sort of a random thing to say. But he is. I can see what you mean by a Radiohead influence, because it is orchestrated and it is. I don't know. It just seems like it's all kind of put together quite nicely.
Yeah.
You know, even Leprous, listening to some of the albums on, like, obviously after I heard that I was going to interview, I wanted to hear that music.
Yeah, me as well.
And I like metal too, so to say the least.
Yeah.
Sure. I know I don't look like it, but I do.
He does not.
But I have a reputation I have to uphold, you know.
Yeah. About that.
So anyways, it was sort of off topic, but yeah. And you worked with Lawrence Gowan. Is that true?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was one session that I did many years ago, like I think 8 years ago now. It was like live in studio recording session, and I had a friend who was already on the session and like recommended me, and so I played on a couple songs, and he was really cool to work with, like super pro, really like super like on top of it, and just like in kind of top form in terms of like his performance and everything, and all the musicians on that session were really, really good. Like, it was the type of thing where it was kind of like pretty much one, maybe two takes of every song, and then, okay, next one. They had like a whole crew, and it was kind of like overwhelming for me in a way, actually. And I remember, it was like, I guess the members from Styx, right, playing a lot of these songs, and it was like Todd Zuckerman playing drums. And I remember that was like, I think that was the thing that impressed me the most, was like playing in the same room as that guy. And it was like, I couldn't believe like the way the time felt when we were playing. It was like the beats felt as big as they could possibly be somehow. Like all the beats felt stretched out. Like it's like he couldn't possibly hit any later, but it felt perfect and it felt huge.
Right.
And that just like totally blew me away in a way that I've never felt from like any other drummer. So that was really interesting.
So his timing was just like impeccable. Basically.
Yeah, it's like the way.
Or is it more than that?
It's the timing. It's also the way you play the time. You know what I mean? Like the side of the beat you're playing on, and the way you mix the drums. Like, you know, which drums get more emphasis, for example, like the kick and the snare and so on, and like how certain like fills signal the band and like announce a new section. But the way of playing, like the way of getting sound out of the instrument and playing on a certain side of the beat, making the music just sound bigger.
Well, that's right up your alley too, right?
Yeah, totally.
You're, like with your cello, him with his drums.
I mean, that's an interesting thing that you say. I wouldn't compare myself to him, but I would feel that like what I aim for in my music is to make the cello kind of larger than life, and to do things with it, both in terms of the composition and like the effects and the sounds that I use, to make it like this kind of massive animal. You know what I mean? That's more than just what it would be on the surface, but for it to have like these greater proportions. And, you know, whether that has to do with like adding size to the sound or like playing something that gives the impression of a bigger texture. Like, for example, an instrument like piano or guitar, like it's easier to play big chords or to like play like lots of kind of arpeggios and stuff with a lot of notes. But you can also simulate that with cello, and there's ways of, you know, giving it this impression of covering a lot more ground. And I really love doing that because it sort of paints a bigger picture. Like you kind of, it's like you're looking through the keyhole and trying to see the landscape, and it just gives you a lot more to work with.
I also believe that, the answers are amazing. This is just...
Well, we're getting an education.
Yeah, we sure are.
I think. Are we sure?
We sure are. Maybe an education in speaking English.
No, you just lost him.
Yeah.
Okay. It's good.
It's good. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that Gowan is actually classically trained as well.
Yeah.
On the piano, I believe.
Is he really? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that would make sense that you would enjoy working with him because he gave you good direction, I would imagine. But
he seems like a really cool guy, though.
Yeah, definitely. And like he was really easy to work with, and like really good at visual cues and communication and stuff. yeah, for sure. Like when you're working with a guy who's obviously like a legend, it's nice when they're also like down to earth and cool, and that they, they give you the time of day. And I totally felt that. And so it was like, something I never would have expected. And so that was, definitely very cool.
That's good, man. Because if the experience was bad, you would have, it just would have been like, why are you like that? And just I don't know. It's funny that you also say that with the cues. Remember we talked to Jason Jack Nunes, and he was telling us about. Have you worked with him, by the way?
I haven't actually.
Oh, okay. Well, you will. Don't worry. We'll set you up. No, I'm just kidding.
Sure.
He's busy enough anyway. You're
both.
So I was just mentioning that the reason I ask is because with cues, he was saying that sometimes it's just a look and it's just like a hand gesture. Or is it that small, like in the actual recording studio?
Well, it depends, I think, on the amount of space between the performers a little bit, but also the effectiveness of the cue. Like, because there's all this stuff is being done live off the floor and like a lot of things being done like off click, then it becomes more important for all the musicians to, especially we did a piece with like piano and string quartet, and like everything has to land together. And when you have so few takes to work with because you're on this really tight schedule, then it becomes very important to capitalize on those moments so that things are synchronized. And so the musicians also breathe together. And that's a huge thing in like chamber music, for example. When you're playing in a string quartet or any chamber configuration, that you are able to find like a time, like like a rhythm, like a shared rhythm, basically. Because it's kind of like this hive mind thing where like you're listening to the inside of the group and you're listening to the overall sound, and you're trying to find good ensemble, within the group. So I think that visual cues can be very helpful to sort of bring everyone together if they're done really effectively, which I thought he did. And so there's an art to that, of course, but a lot of it has to do with just being very clear and like telegraphing your motions and showing tempo with your body. And I think sort of exuding or conveying a sense of like trust as well in the people you're playing with. It's like a mixture of having the confidence and also expressing the trust to your fellow musicians that you're on the same team and you're all there to produce a desired result.
Yeah, that's a very important part, right?
Yeah,
it's just like I'm Gowan, it's a big deal, but you're playing on my record, and I have you here for a reason.
Yeah, for sure. It's like
so you didn't just Yellow Pages. Oh, this guy sounds pretty good. We'll just go with him.
Well, I'm sure that when they got the recommendation, they probably looked him up. And
no doubt.
This guy's actually super talented. So.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know if that happened, but
sure.
it was a cool thing to be part of.
For sure.
But anyway,
I would imagine it would be just as some experience wise, right?
Yeah.
Good on the resume.
Yeah. Is there an artist alive or dead that you'd love to work with?
Yeah, there's a couple. There's
You've been thinking about this, eh?
Well, I mean, it becomes more apparent like over time who you'd really like to work with, and like I would say Tigran Hamasyan would be really cool. Armenian pianist. He's like a kind of a phenomenon now. Like he's been around for a while, making all kinds of amazing records and just getting bigger all the time and just kind of breaking down different boundaries in music. So he would be really cool. Dafer Youssef also, he's like a Tunisian oud player and singer, and he always plays like all the top cats, you know what I mean, all the best players. And I feel like his music, it's kind of like jazzy Middle Eastern music with like a lot of odd time signatures, and it grooves really hard, and it also has like a lot of room for kind of soundscapes and space. And I feel like it's the type of thing where there's enough openness that different types of musicians can be part of it and bring their voice. It's like very kind of chambery in that way, and every member of his band like kind of contributes something very, very unique and powerful. And then finally, a name that like probably not a lot of people here will know, Efren Lopez, who's he's a musician from Spain, from Valencia, I think, originally. And he like plays every instrument. This guy, like he studied all kinds of like different traditions, and he teaches like these workshops in like Greek and like Turkish music and just music from all over, kind of like the Mediterranean. So I kind of grew up like hearing his stuff. I think when I was 14, and I've been pretty much following his work ever since. And like since social media kind of became bigger and there's more, I think, exchange through like video content and stuff, I feel like he's become more visible here in North America to a degree, but still not that much. But for me, like he's like the top, you know what I mean? Like I would just love to do something with this guy, even though I feel kind of maybe unworthy or I'm not sure what I could contribute to his music. It would just be so cool. And I highly recommend like any of his stuff. He has like an amazing solo album, and he has like
Efren Lopez.
Yeah. You have to check this guy out. He's just a complete legend.
Definitely will.
Yeah,
you have to fire off the other names to us on just to message us because I want to listen to other stuff as well.
Definitely. Yeah, for me, like I think working on more kind of, I guess in a more global quote unquote music context is kind of like the next thing for me in a way where I feel that I haven't explored it in a way that I would really. I mean, I've done stuff like that, but I'd like to go further in that regard. Nice. So yeah,
I feel like you're going to.
Yeah, I just think it's going to happen. It's just when it happens.
You're passionate and you're good, and it's all going to come together.
It's just, I think, like pursuing those things, but sometimes also like you have to just reach out to people, and I don't actually do that much because I often have other people reach out to me about their things, and that often leads to really cool stuff. Mm-hmm. For example, I've done a lot of great, like just very fulfilling collaborations, like in the prog scene in the last few years, where like I've played on records with like a lot of people that I looked up to in prog and metal too, and that wasn't something that I kind of planned in any way, although it's something that I always wanted. But it kind of just came to me in time. But also, like, sometimes if you want to do something cool that's specific to you, you need to actually take the first step. And I have to get better at that, actually. So
we'll do it for you.
Oh, yeah, nice.
Efren, we got a guy.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah.
Well, I'll reach out to him.
There you go. James, our guest, has absolutely no problem doing that.
No,
none.
Amazing. I'm a go-getter for sure, messaging people and stuff. I'll do my best for you. How's that?
All right.
Is there a particular music style that you're not really interested in?
Okay, like straight ahead jazz is not something that I am really that interested in, to be honest. Like I would say that like there's more kind of like the more out there stuff, maybe some of the more kind of European jazz than I really like. There's a lot of jazz that I really like, but yeah, a lot of the straight ahead stuff. It's just I don't feel there's any room for like what I do in it so much. And yeah, like country music and like, a lot of like I would say commercial country music. I have no interest in that whatsoever.
Do you like outlaw country music?
I'd say like some of the more like old school stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is like it's more real.
That's what he's alluding to.
No, it is more real.
Yeah. Exactly. Sure. It's like. There's no kind of glossy sheen on it. It's just like the real stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like the real blues, like the old guys, from the deep south and the black guys. Like that for me, that's the real blues,
Agreed. Yeah.
And so anyway, yeah, I would say those types of things I'm not so interested in. There's a lot of electronic music too that doesn't really speak to me. There's a lot that does, but I think that the thing with like the electronic medium to me is that I want to hear air moving, and I want to like hear someone like interacting with a real physical instrument, and at least in some way, and for there to be a feeling of dynamics, and that like I can sense that there's like a human on the other side of the glass, so to speak. So some electronic music is hard to connect with because I feel that there's none of that. And so to me, it's like, as someone who likes to play real instruments, it's harder to find like an entry point or something that I can latch onto. So those are some examples.
Those are good examples.
Yeah.
Yep.
Things that I don't really care for.
That's fair enough.
Yeah. Well, I think I get the electronic thing.
Yeah.
Like you're not, there's no real instruments. There were probably, from what they've taken from, there was some instruments played at one point, but yeah, I get it.
Yeah,
I'm not down
being
with
a
that.
country guy, I understand that the newer. I understand that completely.
Yeah,
like it's just
I'm all about the outlaw.
Yeah. Well, I'm a little bit of both, but I agree with what you're saying 100%. So
yeah, I think and plus, I mean, he has a bit of a different palette with different music from Europe also. So like,
Yes, absolutely.
You've given us a couple good ones to try. We're open to all music, so that's the thing that we do enjoy.
It's be fun to give this stuff a listen to for sure.
Okay, so a serious question now. Who's your favorite Ninja Turtle?
I mean, do I even need to answer that?
No, you don't. No. I just thought I'd throw you off a little bit.
We were talking about this before. We're like, should we ask him this question?
Well, we knew I know that you're very educated in music, so I thought I'd throw you off with a little fun there.
But we're just making okay.
We're still going to ask him the real question, though, right? Like we have to.
So we had to gauge him first to see if he had like the sense of humor was there, right? We didn't want to have some dead air when you. So who's your favorite Ninja Turtle?
That wasn't going to be my opener for sure.
Yeah. I was going to say it's good to warm up into a thing like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But also, I do have some degree of pop culture education. I've been, it's like
no doubt. No.
But the funny thing is, like, a lot of people that study classical music and like they actually come from like a classical music upbringing, and I didn't, And for me, like, I grew up more with pop culture. It's like, I grew up like listening to, like Nirvana on the radio and shit like that. So like to me, it's that's more something that feels like, I guess I feel more at home in a way with that than I do. It's like, oh yeah, this Beethoven quartet or whatever. Yeah, I know the opus number or whatever. Like I don't remember any of that stuff. Like,
no way.
For me, those things are not very important. But also, like, why would anyone, especially now, it's like, can you imagine writing a piece and just like titling it with a number, like a catalog number and like an opus number? I mean, who's going to remember that?
Nobody.
You know what I mean? So it's so interesting how like music has changed in that way. But yeah, I never was able to remember the opus numbers.
Don't you have to?
I think he probably would have had to for an exam, and then but you remember your exams? Do you remember everything you studied for?
I don't remember school.
There you go. So I don't like. I remember studying it and knowing it for that moment, and then completely it's gone. Like out of your mind. So.
It says a lot about learning within a confined period of time, and then never touching that thing again.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. Yeah,
you know what I mean. Your mind has to be on it outside of the framework of the class that you're in.
Yeah, that's right.
And like for me, like music was so much a part of my everyday life that like, when I was in high school, I was like thinking about music in math class. I was like, I already know what I want to do. Like, I'm not thinking about math right now. Sorry.
Yeah. That's
well, there's nothing wrong with that. I did that all through my life.
Yeah. Well, no, you focus on what you like.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
With what? Ask him the question?
Yeah.
I already know the answer.
So do I, because it's for me.
80s or 90s?
Well,
we already know. Just
90s.
Just say it.
90s baby. So, but honestly though, like we're at a point now where we're kind of at the 30-year mark roughly. So it's like there's all this kind of 90s nostalgia. It used to be 80s nostalgia, I think, in the last decade.
Yep.
And it reminds you of like all the cool stuff there was in the 90s. Actually, I feel like in terms of like music aesthetic, films, like so many good movies, and kind of again like aesthetically, there's a certain grit to it. You know what I mean? And, just the style and everything.
Exactly.
Like so I've been feeling it for sure, and like I don't know. It's just interesting how these things come around, and of course now like new generations are kind of getting into things. So it's like generations that didn't know any of that stuff now, like TikTok is bringing it all back for them, and they're discovering it the first time, and that's so bizarre in a way, but it's also cool that like things can just get revived instantly through that medium.
90s clothing is all back. 90s shoes, like the Air Jordans are like really the 2000s didn't produce anything that was really that exciting. Really, the 90s, man. Well, it's all about the 90s.
Oh man, 90s are sick. Yeah.
I'm being ganged up on.
No, man.
I'm just teasing.
So obviously the tour is next, right, in September, and then you're going to do some shows around Ottawa, and what else is going on? Yeah,
well, I'm working on my own records. I just got back from the studio with Dean Watson, who you guys introduced.
Yeah, nice.
He's the man.
Were you at Buckingham Palace?
I was, yeah.
What's with that tub? Can you tell us a bit about it?
Well, the tub is where all the debauchery happens, of course.
Yeah, fair enough.
You know what I mean?
Where else would it happen?
Yeah. Like some dude sleeping in there,
Well, it's like I can make all of my critical thinking decisions, on the mix from the tub. I can just be lounging in there.
Have you played the cello in the tub yet? Is the real question, I wonder.
Not yet, but
pretty tough to do, I think.
Yeah, you have to have like a waterproof cello, maybe. It could be like a.
Well, it doesn't have to have water in it.
Oh, I mean, just playing it in the tub without any water in the tub. That's like not very exciting, is it?
No, but, he's right.
Yeah, come on, James.
My bad, guys. Sorry.
There was an upright that lived in the tub for quite a long time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just the upright just sat in the tub. It was just lounging in there. Yeah, so we've been working on a new record for my group, The Visit, which is kind of long overdue in a way, but it's been a really challenging record to make in some ways, but I think it's going to be really cool, and it will surprise everybody a lot.
Can't wait.
Again, hopefully in a good way. So yeah, making your own stuff, it's like, especially when you're doing something that hasn't necessarily been done in that way before, you have to kind of figure out what you're doing as you go. Like there's no roadmap. If you're playing in a certain style, then there's certain parameters, and you can also emulate things that have worked for other people. But in this case, it was the same with our first record. Like we had to kind of just figure out the path as we went along. And then this record is a very different style and approach. So, we're doing things in a rather experimental way. But what I like about working with Dean is that he's very open to creative experimentation within the process, and doing things that are a bit risky, and doing a lot of sound design, and being very receptive to all the different requests I have, where it's like, oh, maybe we can pop this plugin on, and we can use this delay, and then we can tremolate that delay, or we can like put an EQ on this thing that'll like open up in a certain way, and then can we like add like an extra distortion on this, and and have like all these things running at the same time. And now we're at a point where like the project is so huge and so complex that the computer can barely even play the songs. So it's like it's actually very demanding in that way. And so yeah, but I'm going to be working on completing that in the next while, and it'll be out hopefully next year. And
nice.
Gonna get to work on some more solo album material, to do some more solo releases. That's kind of been my focus artistically, I guess. Lately, I've been doing a lot of solo shows in town, and it's been really nice to do that stuff more, and to write more of that stuff. And I just throughout the the last couple of years in particular, since the pandemic, actually, I did even more session work than before. So like this year I had a lot of recording, a lot of pretty intense projects. Last year was the craziest year I've had, because there were very few shows. Of course, so it was really just like I was just working from home, doing tons of recording, and like working for a lot of people from different countries, and just like sending files, and that was really cool. I'm trying to kind of shift away from that and like do more of my own shows and focus more on making my own albums, because I have a lot of material written. So I feel that I need to kind of like figure out that body of work and like get it out there, and kind of get on a bit more of a release schedule too with my solo material that's more consistent. It's always a challenge, right? I mean, you guys like have the podcast, so you know exactly how that goes, and it's really tricky with music to be able to stay on a release schedule and be consistent, and to complete things within like a given time frame. It requires like such a high level of discipline, because everything always takes longer than expected, no matter what. And particularly when you're making like complex music, and maybe you have second thoughts about certain things, and you kind of want to keep tweaking it until it gets to the point where there's nothing left for you to really improve. And that sometimes things just take the time that they take, and you have to trust in that process. But in order to meet, I think, the demands of the market now, then you have to be especially hardworking and very organized, so that you can also funnel your creativity into that level of demand and pressure, which honestly, like if you can be on top of that stuff, and like first of all, you have my like my respect, but also I think that's kind of the move right now. Like you have to stay relevant, and you have to work your ass off. That's just how it is. Like, and making excuses is not going to make it go away. You just have to. So, for me, I'm kind of in it for the grind in a way. I like that. And I like to see like how hard I can push myself with this stuff.
That's awesome, man.
Yep. That's great.
We really appreciate your time today.
Oh yeah,
really
thanks
an
for
amazing
having me.
conversation.
This has been an amazing conversation.
Yeah, I can't wait to see you around town too. We're gonna
awesome!
check you out for sure.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah.
Well, thanks again.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So best of luck on the tour.
I appreciate it. Yeah, looking forward.
Take care now.
Until next time.
Yeah, for sure.